Hi, y'all. Since we're spending so much time at home, I thought I would read over the course of many days Phyllis Diller's Housekeeping Hints. This book was written in 1966, and if you don't know who Phyllis Diller is, fix that. Go to the YouTube. We wouldn't have a lot of the amazing female comedians that we have today if it were not for Miss Phyllis Diller. So, hey, Stephen. Stephen! 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 Do you know who Phyllis Diller? Oh, okay. This is dedicated to all the ladies who would rather skip the housework. The introduction is written by Bob Hope. If you don't know who Bob Hope is, look that up too. This book is the work of Phyllis Diller, the lady with 1,000 gags. Oh, 1,002. I forgot her face and her figure. Phyllis is the only woman, well, that's a wild guess, I know who was refused a subscription to Good Housekeeping. You'll understand why if you've ever visited her home. I did. On the bat's day off. Have you ever seen her living room? Have you seen the Surveyor Moon pictures? Then you've seen her living room. The rug is so deep in dust, the moths carry a pick and a shovel. Her refrigerator door has so many fingerprints on it that the FBI uses it to train agents. The last time she had a picnic, the ants picketed. You've heard about people who can't boil water? Well, Phyllis can. She calls it soup. Her kitchen is so poorly organized, she keeps a mouse on a leash so she can find the cheese. She has the only dining room table I know with a garbage disposal for a centerpiece. So who's better qualified to write a book on what's new in housekeeping? Bob Hope. This is the foreword by Miss Phyllis Diller. Since there is no humane society for housewives, and since housewives can never say, my contract expires at midnight and it will not be renewed unless, ... I have written a book to help. I can't bear to see women doing a lot of work for nothing. By clever thinking, housewives may stay away from hard labor and still create the picture of being the mother in the book. For instance, when you're out in the evening, you can make the statement, oh, I was on my feet for hours tonight getting supper. You don't have to honestly add, they were short of help at the drive-in and I was at the end of a long line. This book is filled with such helpful half-truths, quarter-truths, and even 1/64th truths. Just like I'm going to say, this book was recommended by a marriage counselor, but I won't add who wanted some business. Chapter 1. How to get the chenille marks off your face when the doorbell rings. There's a little poem underneath. Cleaning your house while your kids are still growing is like shoveling the walk before it stops snowing. The Sloppy Housekeeper's Almanac. I am an immaculate housekeeper. I'm clean, but the house is a mess. I suspected I wouldn't be the perfect housewife the way I botched up the wedding cake. They won't even sell me Good Housekeeping magazine. They're afraid it might be seen in my home. And I can't blame them. I'm such a lousy housekeeper, even the white pages in my phone book are yellow. I know people who are so clean you can eat off their floors. You can't eat off my table. Fang, my husband, says the only thing domestic about me is that I was born in this country. Some women have qualities that take away the need for being a domestic expert, but unfortunately I do not. When I stand next to Jane Mansfield, if you don't know who Jane Mansfield is, look it up, I feel like a cake with the baking powder left out. And household ability wouldn't matter if I were a financial genius, but if I invested in mouthwash stock, bad breath would suddenly become popular. Besides this, I live next door to Mrs. Clean, who bleaches her snow. She's got dust cloths for her dust cloths. Everything at her house folds up and puts away. She has a folding ping pong table that has folding ping pong balls. She polishes her furniture so much you can see it in your face. Now, why in heaven's name would I want to do that? Nope. What I mean is she polishes her furniture so much you can see her face in it. She is so anxious to get back to doing housework. When she goes out, she wears white rubber gloves. But I have learned that by playing my cards right, and I don't have a stacked deck, I can create the illusion of being a good housekeeper without the drudgery. And I have perfected the following plan of attack. When buying a new house, you can forget about mortgages, locations, and foundations. There are really only 3 things worth remembering. Number 1, buy the biggest house you can find so that when your children are grown up and your husband or some other idiot says, "Why don't you get a job and help out with college expenses?" you can say, "With this house?" Don't bring up the fact that 29 of the 32 rooms are permanently closed off. Number 2, buy the house far enough away from school so your kids can't come home for lunch. Number 3, always buy a house with a fireplace even if you live in the middle of the desert. Dirt can always be blamed on a faulty flue. This is a new section. Remember that dirt belongs to you. If there's anything as disgusting as a dirty wall, it must be somewhere around my house. Number 1, I explain away the smudges on my walls as the height marks of my kids, which I'm too sentimental to wash off. Number 2, when wall washing is being discussed, I say, "Oh, I haven't been able to do that since the accident." If anyone should ask what accident, just prefer not to talk about it. If my husband had any heart at all, he wouldn't expect me to stay in a house that messy. However, I know my way around and have worked out some useful methods of dealing with housework. Number 1, complain about your high water bills, and don't let anyone know that they're actually the minimum. Number 2, during spring and fall house cleaning time, put your arm in a sling. Number 3, drape a rag over the stepladder in front of a window, and it will look as if you've been washing. Number 4, have an unused dust mop to shake out the front door, and shake the real one out the back door at night. Number 5, leave your sink full of dishes. It's a good way to cover up a dirty sink. This is a new section. Exercise your right not to exercise. There is only one sure way to get your house cleaned every day. Have a party every night. On a morning you just can't get started, phone the doctor to make a house call, and in about 40 minutes you'll have everything cleaned up. Then call him back and tell him not to come. First, the cellar. Number 1, hide your husband's golf shoes. He may clean up the cellar looking for them. Number 2, you can always explain your dirty cellar windows as a civil defense measure until you get sandbags. Then clean corners. Number 1, every so often dig out the corners. It's a good idea even if it does make the middle of the room a mess. I finally did it the other day when I noticed a gopher hole. On to pots and pans. Number 1, to get a roaster clean, send something like baked apples in it to a neighbor. Neighbors always return pans spotless, and you won't have to use a blowtorch on it like you usually do. Windows. Number 1, keep at least one window pane clean to check the weather. Once when I didn't do this, I sent the kids off with umbrellas for 6 straight weeks. Dust with care. Number 1, don't dust the cupboard shelves. Then you can fit things where they belong on the spots where there's no dust. Clean fixtures. Number 1, instead of washing the light fixtures, just use stronger bulbs. In 3 years, I've gone from 25 watts to 1,000. A final word. Number 1, if your house is so messed up that you must either hire a cleaning lady or a guide, and you decide on a cleaning lady, Get one who commutes from out of town so she doesn't talk among your friends. Where there's smoke, it's usually only dirt. If somebody, like a husband, tells you to get busy, say, all right, if you want that bare, clean, sterile look. Often say, I let my family live in our house. Use the words casual, comfortable, informal a lot. Our house has gone past the lived-in look. It has more of a no survivors look. When a guest can't control himself and finally comments on how terrible your place looks, these replies will help you out. Number 1. In the summer, blame dust on open windows. In winter, on the furnace. Number 2. If someone points out a cobweb, quickly say, oh, you mean William's science project? Number 3. You could say, I would have cleaned, but I'm helping my son's pediatrician conduct an allergy test. What real home is without bugs? Don't worry about bugs on your plants, unless you have artificial plants. Number 1. If you were out someplace and see a cockroach, say something like, now what do you suppose that insect is? Never be able to identify bugs. Number 2. If worse comes to worse, you can always try to make friends with them. Dishonesty is the best policy. Number 1. Blame a lot of things, like soiled wallpaper, greasy walls, and a dirty basement, on the previous owners, even if you've lived there for 25 years. Number 2. Get a dog. Dog owners are not expected to have orderly houses. Even if the lazy mutt hasn't moved for years, people will blame all the toss, throw rugs, and beat up furniture on his playfulness. As the owner of an untrained puppy once says, it takes a heap to make a house a home. Number 3. A dangerous question from Mrs. Clean, meaning that she'd like to see the upstairs, is, how many bedrooms do you have? Just say none. If she asks outright to see the upstairs, tell her they are fake stairs. Number 4. Mrs. Clean's Mr. Clean will emphasize every point by pounding his fists on the furniture. Lead him to a hard chair instead of a dusty Davenport. Number 5. If summer has passed and you didn't get around to storing the winter clothes, just use strong-smelling moth spray when you start wearing them again. Number 6. Remember, sweeping the porch is more effective than sweeping the living room unless you have a picture window you can be seen through. I have a horrible view out of our picture window. I see myself in the picture window across the street, and you should have heard what I said about that ugly broad before I found out it was me. Number 7. If your house is really a mess and a stranger comes to the door, greet him with, who could have done this? We have no enemies. Or, you must be from the bomb squad. Okay. I hope you've enjoyed the first few pages of Phyllis Diller's Housekeeping Hints. More to come.